In other news, the Trade Union Federation Saftu says it wants all government officials to send their children to government schools to try and force them to improve the schooling that is provided in the majority of these schools. Saftu making this point in light particularly of planned measures by the National Treasury to cut back on the amount of money it's giving to government departments, including the Education Department. Trevor Shaku is the spokesperson for Saftu. Trevor, good afternoon to you. Why do you believe government officials should be sending their children to government schools?
Thank you, Steve, for having us. We are actually referring to senior government officials, from district directors to the president, because we think that the neglect which we see in public education is partly because of the fact that their children are not going to these schools. And that is the reason why they cut expenditure on infrastructure, they cut expenditure on procurements of learning and teaching material. Also, they cut expenditure on the hiring of teachers and other support staff in the education sector. And this cuts across the three areas of expenditure have got a serious impact, negative impact, on the ability of public schools to be able to deliver quality education to our people. We are currently standing with 80% of grade 4 learners in public education who cannot read for a minute, who also 90 to 94% of them cannot understand mathematics and numeracy. We have about 15,000 schools which do not have libraries. According to the National Infrastructure Management System report, which was published in 2021, you have about 19,000 schools without natural science laboratories, about 17,000 of them without maths laboratories. And beyond this, you have schools which do not have internet as a measure, or rather as a resource which will enable the schools to be able to function on both administrative side, but also on the side of teaching and learning, because internet is no longer about receiving emails, so that the clerks in the administrative block of our schools should be able to send and receive information, but it's about teaching and learning, because you have learners who have got various kinds of barriers to learning, and those various kinds of barriers to learning requires on the part of teachers to do or apply what we call curriculum differentiation. Curriculum differentiation requires them to assess each and every learner and identify their needs, and thereof apply the methods which will help these particular learners to bridge the problems that they have in terms of learning. So in this instance, internet is very important for those particular teachers to be able to use visual and audiovisual material downloaded from the internet sites in their own classrooms. Without internet, schools will not be able to function.
Trevor, I know you and I often fight on this platform at this time for some reason, but this time I completely agree with you. I wonder if maybe, and I don't often give advice to unions, but maybe you should go a little bit further, because there's some government schools, particularly in urban areas, Joburg's an example, that are pretty much as good, even better than some private schools. And in fact, maybe what it needs to be is that the officials who work in departments in certain areas need to send children to school in those areas. If you are the district official in charge of Soweto South, for example, then your children need to go to school in Soweto South, not Craig Hall.
I agree. In fact, we even take it a little bit further. In the very statement, we are proposing that the quintile of schools which these particular senior officials must take their learners to should be in quintile 1 to quintile 3, because these are the poorly resourced schools in this country. Now, of course, if we just allow them to take their children to public schools without specifically identifying which cohort of schools should they take their learners to, or their children rather to, they would take their children to fee-paying schools in the public sector in quintile 4 and 5. And those are well-resourced. And again, they will not, of course, feel the pinch of the less quality of education that is delivered in quintile 1 to quintile 3. So we are very prescriptive even in demanding that these senior officials must take their children to public schools, so that those poorly resourced schools from quintile 1 to quintile 3 will be able to get pressure from the very officials, because when they know that their learners or rather their children are going to those particular schools, they will invest the resources and they will do proper due diligence in terms of monitoring to ensure that curriculum and syllabus are implemented as they should, but also that the other support material that the school require in order to be able to perform, including infrastructure, learning and teaching material, desks, and all other necessary resources to support even in extracurricular activities, they will be resourced. Because we think when they continue to be allowed to take their children to schools which are well-resourced, they will not even care. And that is the reason why constantly they continue to apply these cuts in critical areas of expenditure. And remember, Treasury gives them this budget. It does not dictate to them where should they invest this money. What you will find in most of these districts is that money has not been spent and allocated properly even. So on the first instance, it is on the basis that these district managers, these officials and senior officials in government are not properly spending the money that is allocated to them, let alone the fact that we are crying that it is cut and is not enough to be able to meet all the spending priorities.
Trevor, we have the medium-term budget policy statement tomorrow, and in fact we'll speak to an economist about that in just a moment. Are you worried about cuts to education?
We are very worried, although education has not received greater cuts than any other department, but we are. If you check at the medium-term budget policy statement of 2022, you will see there that the Department of Education has, at least in comparison to inflation, received lower allocations. And those particular allocations have impact on the basis of already the spending needs that I've explained, infrastructure, goods, and the hiring of teachers. So in that context, we are worried because this would mean that our education system will continue to produce poor results that we see. And do not be fooled by what we see in grade 12, because what we see in grade 12 is actually a misnomer, a sacrifice of the whole education sector to ensure that grade 12 results present a positive picture so that the minister can always come and celebrate. And that is a problem, because where learners have to be developed is at the foundation phase. It is from grade R to grade 3, and even from grade 4 to grade 6, the foundation phase and the intermediate phase. If you do not solidify and strengthen that particular phase, you will have problems of learners who cannot be able to learn at the later grades because their learning abilities were sacrificed at the foundation phase.
Trevor.
And if we continue to have these cuts, we're going to have those particular problems for the future, and we're not going to solve the problems that have abounded our own education system.
Trevor Shaku, nice to walk together hand in hand rather than arm wrestling with each other for a change. Thank you very much indeed. Do appreciate the time.